Start by describing the moment. The quiet room, the empty chairs, the solitary meal. Let the audience feel the emotional weight of spending such a milestone birthday alone, while those you love are elsewhere. I sat at the kitchen table. Same one I've had for years, with one candle stuck into a store-bought cupcake, the kind with icing so sweet it burns your teeth a little. It was one of those quiet birthdays. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the sacred kind, but the heavy, disappointing kind. The kind that makes the air feel still, even when the window's open. There was no phone call that morning. No knock at the door. No, "Hey Mom, scoot over, I brought you lunch." Nothing. I lit that candle myself. Sang a little happy birthday under my breath, half-heartedly, like I was trying not to disturb the silence, as if I was the one being rude by existing. And while I sat there chewing on that cupcake, I couldn't stop thinking about where they were. Sun-kissed somewhere in the Caribbean. Seen the pictures. My daughter had posted one with a caption that said, "Making memories, beach with umbrella, yellow heart." And I remember reading that and laughing out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so off the mark it almost felt like a joke. I was making memories too, apparently. Just a different kind. Me be clear. I didn't want a parade. I didn't need fireworks. I'm 75, not 7. I didn't expect cake and streamers and people jumping out from behind furniture yelling, "Surprise!" But I did expect something. Voice. Visit. A moment of recognition. I've always believed that birthdays aren't really about the gifts or the party. They're about the people. They're about someone else taking just one moment to say, "I see you. I'm glad you were born. You matter to me." And yet there I was, alone. Not because I didn't have a family. Not because they were busy scraping by or dealing with some emergency. No, they were on a trip. Trip I paid for. A vacation they'd asked for casually back in March. "Mom, you always say experiences matter more than things. So we thought maybe instead of gifts this year we could all go somewhere special. Together." Said yes. Course I said yes. Always say yes. I wired the money, booked the flights, even helped plan the itinerary. They'd said, "You'll come too." But somewhere along the way that became, "You probably wouldn't enjoy the heat. And it's a lot of walking, you know. And maybe it's best if you sit this one out, Mom, relax for once." And I nodded like I always do. Told them it was fine. Waved from the porch as they drove away. And it wasn't until that birthday morning, sitting at the table with a $2 cupcake and no calls, that it really hit me. I didn't say no because I was okay with being left behind. I said no because I wanted them to enjoy themselves. I said no because I thought I was doing the right thing, the selfless thing. But when did selflessness start to feel like erasure? It's a strange thing, realizing your presence has become optional. That you're no longer central but peripheral. Background. Support staff. Creeps up on you. At first it's subtle. They stop asking your opinion on things. They assume you'll be home. They borrow but forget to check in. And then one day they're off making memories with your money. And you're at home watching the coffee drip. I know some people would say, "Well, maybe they just forgot." Or, "They probably meant to call." But here's the truth. People make time for what matters. And on that day, that very personal, significant day, I didn't matter enough. Not enough to call. Not enough to remember. That kind of clarity. It's not devastating. It's clarifying. Because once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. And while it hurt, I'm not going to pretend it didn't. It also woke me up. Because I realized something sitting at that table with my single cupcake. I've been teaching them how to treat me. Every time I put their needs ahead of mine. Every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I gave freely, but never spoke up about what I needed in return. I was writing the script. And I was the one who kept playing the role of the background character in my own life. That realization changed everything. Owing life on your dime. When I was younger, I used to believe that love looked like big moments. Holidays. Graduations. The kind of events where everyone's dressed up, smiling, captured in a photo that gets framed and hung on a wall. But over the years, over the decades, I came to understand that real love, the love that actually builds a life, doesn't show up like that. It shows up in quiet ways. In early mornings. In showing up for the parent-teacher conferences. In staying late at work not because you want to, but because your kid needs braces and you can't let the insurance lapse. It's in the meals made, the bills paid, the sleepless nights spent worrying about a teenager who still hadn't come home. That was me. That was my love. I gave my family everything I had. And I don't just mean financially. Yes, I helped cover college. Yes, I've been the emergency contact on every form since the beginning of time. But it goes deeper than that. It's the kind of giving that becomes part of your identity. I gave my time, my energy, my weekends, my patience. I gave up my own dreams quietly, one at a time, to make sure they had a shot at theirs. I never resented it. Not once. When you're in it, when your kids are small and your days are busy and you feel like the glue holding everything together, you don't stop to ask yourself how you're doing. You just do it. You just keep giving because that's what love looks like to you. It's not a transaction. It's a decision. Daily one. But what happens when you've built your life around giving? And the people you gave to stop noticing? That's what started to happen. Slowly. They grew up, which is what you want them to do, right? You raise them to be independent, strong, capable. And then they are. But somewhere in that transition, the current shifted. I used to be the center of their world, and then I became the safety net. The backup plan. The default, yes. Need help with the down payment. Got you. Unexpected bills. Course. Babysitting last minute because something came up? I didn't mind. I actually liked being needed. I liked that I could help. It made me feel useful, like I still had a role. Because when you've spent your whole life pouring yourself into other people, being useful feels like being loved. But that's the trap, isn't it? You keep giving, thinking that eventually the love will come back around. That it'll show up the way you send it out. But love doesn't always boomerang. Especially when you've trained everyone around you that your needs come last. There's this thing that happens when people get used to being taken care of. They start to believe it's normal. They stop seeing the effort. The sacrifices become invisible. The giving becomes expected. And before long, it's not even appreciated. It's just assumed. And you know what? I helped create that dynamic. I never spoke up. I never said, "Hey, I'm tired." Or, "I need help too." I just kept saying yes. Kept being the fixer. The one they could count on. I thought that was strength. I thought that's what a good parent, a good woman does. And I know some of you are sitting here thinking, but isn't that what love is? But love isn't supposed to leave you empty. It's not supposed to feel like a one-way street. On my 75th birthday, while my family was off somewhere snorkeling or ziplining or drinking rum out of coconuts, with a vacation I paid for, I sat at home thinking about all the ways I've shown up for them over the years. Not in anger, not in bitterness. Just in truth. I thought about all the birthdays I made special for them. The times I stayed up all night sewing a costume or editing a college application essay. I thought about how many times I rearranged my life for theirs. And then I thought, would they have done the same for me? I wasn't sure of the answer. And that's what stung the most. Because here's the thing. Love is a two-way relationship. And if one person is always giving and the other is always receiving, that's not love. That's a habit. That's dependency. That's imbalance. I didn't want a payback. I wasn't looking for some big gesture. I just wanted to feel seen. To feel like my role in their lives wasn't just behind-the-scenes support. That I wasn't just the bank or the babysitter or the backup plan. That I was still their person in some way. Not just someone they once needed, but someone they still valued. And it was in that quiet moment, sitting alone, remembering all the years of quiet giving, that I realized I deserved more than just being remembered when something was needed. I deserved to be remembered when something mattered. Didn't hit me all at once. That's the thing about realizations that actually matter. They don't usually come with fanfare or lightning bolts. They show up slowly, quietly, in small moments that you almost ignore. For me, it started when I looked at my phone, just after I'd lit the birthday candle and saw the time. It was nearly 3 in the afternoon. Still no call. Not even a text. And I remember thinking maybe the Wi-Fi on the cruise ship is spotty. Maybe they'll call later. But even as I gave them that excuse, I felt something shift in my stomach. It was this small, sinking sensation. You know when you've tried to convince yourself that everything is fine, and then your body, before your brain catches up, goes, "Nope. Something's off." That was it. Still, I brushed it aside. I got up, washed a dish that didn't need washing, sat back down, scrolled through old photos, and started playing that game we all play when we don't want to face the truth. The one where you minimize, justify, or reframe what's happening so it doesn't hurt quite as much. They probably thought I was doing something with friends. Maybe they didn't want to bother me. It's just one day. They're on vacation, they deserve to have fun. And then there was the loudest lie of them all. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. Not because I expect the world to stop spinning on my birthday. Not because I need a fuss. But because I mattered enough to remember. Or I should have. And that's when it hit me. The harsh realization that the very people I had poured the best parts of my life into had organized an entire vacation, using money I gave them. And not one of them paused to include me in the experience. Not one of them said, "Hey, this trip overlaps with Mom's birthday. Should we maybe not? Or at least make sure she's celebrated." I wasn't just an afterthought. I wasn't even a thought. And here's what I want to say about that. That moment of realization. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the vacation. It wasn't even about the birthday, really. It was about the story I'd been telling myself my whole life. That if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, I would be cherished in return. But the truth is, I had built an entire identity around being there for everyone else. And I expected, silently without ever saying it out loud, that one day that loyalty would circle back. That all the giving would result in some unspoken contract being honored. That they'd remember me not just in emergencies, but in joy. That I would matter on the days that counted. That day, sitting alone, I realized I had set myself up for this disappointment by never actually teaching anyone how to treat me. It's easy to believe that love guarantees appreciation. That family guarantees inclusion. But it doesn't. Not unless you make it clear what you need. Not unless you draw lines and say, "This is how I want to be treated. This is what respect looks like to me." I never did that. I smiled through the slights. I said, "Don't worry about it," when I actually was worried. I said, "It's fine," when it absolutely wasn't. Because I thought it was more loving to stay quiet. I thought it made me more noble, more kind, more generous. But all it did was make me invisible. And that's what the cupcake moment taught me. That realization sitting at my own kitchen table wasn't just painful. It was illuminating. I could no longer pretend that being forgotten was a fluke. It wasn't. It was a pattern. And it was one I had helped create. I think for so many of us we're raised to believe that if we just hang in there long enough, if we just keep being the good one, the reliable one, the non-needy one, we'll be rewarded with connection. But connection doesn't come from martyrdom. Comes from honesty. From showing up fully, including with your own needs. Especially with your own needs. And let me tell you, it is a painful thing to realize that the life you built around love and support and showing up hasn't translated into the kind of presence and care you always hoped it would. But it's also liberating. Because once you see it, really see it, you can finally stop waiting for something that may never come. You stop hoping people will change on their own. You stop bending into versions of yourself that are easier for others to use but harder for you to live in. You stop editing your emotions so no one else has to feel uncomfortable. You finally say, "This is not okay. I deserve more than this." And you mean it. There's a lot we don't talk about when it comes to family. We talk about love, sacrifice, loyalty. But what about what we owe each other? That's a question that doesn't get asked enough, especially in families. We assume love is unconditional, that it covers everything, that it means showing up no matter what, that it's enough to just be related by blood. But as I sat alone on my 75th birthday, while my family was off on vacation, paid for by me, I started thinking about what we really owe each other, and what happens when those obligations are ignored. Because love isn't just a feeling or a set of memories. It's a responsibility. And that responsibility doesn't disappear once the kids grow up, move out and start their own lives. Changes, sure. Takes new shapes. But it doesn't vanish. There's a kind of unspoken contract between parents and children, one that's often overlooked, and it goes both ways. For decades, I gave everything I had to my family. I gave time, money, emotional support, late-night conversations, early morning breakfasts, a shoulder to cry on. I was the one who made sure birthdays were celebrated, who listened when things got hard, who sacrificed personal dreams so my family could chase theirs. I didn't keep score, but I hoped that what I gave would create a foundation, not just for them to build on but for us to share. But as the years went by, something shifted. The kids I raised became adults, and with adulthood came distance, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional. And while it's natural for children to grow independent, there's also an expectation, an obligation, that grown children remain connected, that they make room for their parents in their lives, that they honor the sacrifices made for them by showing up in return. And I'm not talking about grand gestures or expensive gifts. I'm talking about the simple things. A phone call on your birthday, a visit now and then, a little acknowledgement that says, "You matter to me." It's about respect, about reciprocity, about understanding that love isn't just about what was given but about what continues to be shared. When that didn't happen, I had to ask myself, what does family really mean if we don't show up for one another when it counts? What does love mean if it's one-sided? Because what I learned sitting alone on my birthday is this. Family is not a free pass. It's not a lifetime subscription you get just for being related. It's a commitment. And commitments require work. They require presence. We often tell ourselves that parents should just be grateful to have children, that it's enough for us to love them unconditionally. But love without boundaries, without mutual respect, without care, can become something else entirely. Something that drains you, that diminishes you, that leaves you feeling invisible. And it's on the grown children to recognize this too. To recognize that the people who raised them, who sacrificed for them, deserve more than a maybe next time. They deserve more than forgotten birthdays and missed phone calls. They deserve presence, not just presence. This is where responsibility becomes a two-way street. It's not just about parents giving. It's about children acknowledging, honoring, and reciprocating. It's about understanding that what was invested in us was not just money or time. It was a part of a person's life and soul. It was love shown through action. And when I say we owe each other, I don't mean it in a transactional way. It's not about keeping score or expecting repayment like a ledger. It's about the kind of debt that's paid forward with gratitude and respect. It's about making sure the people who helped us become who we are aren't left behind or forgotten when life gets busy. The absence of that kind of care creates cracks, creates silence. It creates that terrible feeling of being alone in a room full of people who are supposed to care. And it's a lesson that took me far too long to learn, that I had to learn by experiencing that loneliness firsthand. But here's the thing. Recognizing what we owe each other also means realizing that we can't assume it will just happen. We have to speak up. We have to set expectations. We have to hold people accountable with kindness but also with firmness. Because love without action is just an idea. Something we tell ourselves stories about. But love with action is what builds and sustains families. It's what keeps us connected when life pulls us in 100 different directions. So what do we owe each other? We owe presence. We owe respect. We owe the willingness to prioritize one another, even when it's inconvenient. We owe the small moments that add up to a life lived together, not apart. And for those of us who have spent a lifetime giving, it means we owe ourselves the right to expect that in return. To ask for it without guilt. To demand it without shame. Because family isn't just about blood. It's about commitment. And that commitment is ongoing. It doesn't expire at a certain age or a certain milestone. It's something we have to renew every day. And if we don't, then what's left isn't family. It's just a collection of people who happen to share a name. That's the truth I learned when I sat alone on my birthday. And it's a truth I'm choosing to live by from now on. For most of my life I believed that boundaries were something other people put up. People who were strict, maybe even a little cold. I thought boundaries meant saying no and feeling guilty about it afterward. Saying no to family. That felt almost impossible. Especially when I'd spent so many years saying yes to everything they needed, everything they asked for, everything they hoped for. But sitting alone on my 75th birthday, while my family was off enjoying a vacation I'd paid for, I realized something important. Boundaries aren't walls that shut people out. They're bridges that help us protect who we are and how we want to be treated. It's not easy, especially when you're my age. After decades of being the caregiver, the one who shows up, the one who sacrifices, it feels unnatural, even selfish to say, "No, this isn't okay with me." But here's the truth. Boundaries are not about punishment or creating distance. They're about respect. They're about teaching others how to treat you by first deciding how you will treat yourself. When I was younger, I thought love was about endless giving. I thought love meant putting myself last every time. And maybe that's what we all think when we're raising families. You don't think about what happens when you're older. You just give because it feels right. Because it's what you're supposed to do. But when you realize that giving without limits has left you invisible, it forces a reckoning. You start to see that your silence has been taken for granted. That your willingness to accommodate every request has become an expectation, not a choice. And that realization can break your heart or it can wake you up. Chose to wake up. I decided that at 75, I would no longer accept being treated as an option. I would no longer accept being left out, forgotten, or sidelined. And that meant setting boundaries, clear, firm, and unapologetic boundaries. But setting boundaries at this stage of life, it's complicated. There's guilt. There's fear of rejection. There's the worry that family will see you differently, that they'll think you're difficult or ungrateful. And those fears are real. But they are not reasons to stay silent. Because here's the secret. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about drawing a line around your well-being and saying, "This is what I need to feel valued." And when you do that, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling like a doormat. You start reclaiming your voice. You start showing up for yourself the way you've shown up for others all these years. I won't pretend it's easy. Saying no to your own children, especially when they're adults and you want to believe everything is fine, is hard. Saying, "I expect to be included on my birthday," or "I need you to call me," can feel uncomfortable, like you're making demands where there used to be love. But the truth is, love without respect isn't love at all. Boundaries are the language of self-respect. They teach others how to treat you and remind yourself that your feelings matter. They say, "I am worth your time. I am worth your thoughtfulness." And boundaries don't have to be dramatic. They don't need to be loud or confrontational. Sometimes they're as simple as speaking up. Saying, "I'd really appreciate a call on my birthday." Or, "It hurts me when I'm left out of family plans." Or even, "I love you, but I need you to treat me with respect." When I finally started setting boundaries, I noticed something surprising. People respected me more, not less. They responded with care, with attention, with a renewed sense of connection. Because boundaries don't push people away. They invite healthier relationships. Of course, not everyone will respond the way you hope. Sometimes, setting boundaries means facing disappointment or even distance. But that's a risk worth taking, because living without boundaries, without respect, is a slow kind of loneliness that eats away at your spirit. And if you think you're too old to set boundaries, think again. It's never too late. I'm living proof. At 75, I'm still learning to say no to what doesn't serve me, and yes to what nourishes me. Setting boundaries has been one of the most empowering things I've done. It's given me clarity. It's given me peace. And it's given me a new kind of joy. Joy in being seen and honored as I am. I want you to hear this, especially if you've spent years giving everything to others and feeling invisible in return. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You deserve to have your needs heard. You deserve to set boundaries without guilt. And setting those boundaries, that's not just good for you. It's good for everyone around you. Because it creates space for honest, loving relationships that don't drain you but uplift you. So, if you've been sitting quietly, feeling overlooked or undervalued, take a deep breath and say it out loud, even if only to yourself. I deserve better. I deserve respect. I deserve to be included. And then start living like you mean it. 'Cause at any age you get to choose how you show up. And you get to decide what you will accept. Chose boundaries. And that choice changed everything. You know, one of the hardest things about moments like sitting alone on my 75th birthday while my family was off on a vacation I paid for, It's not just the loneliness or the disappointment. It's the way it forces you to face your own truth. The truth about what you've accepted, what you've tolerated, and what you still want for yourself going forward. For a long time I told myself that this was just how life works, that love means sacrifice, that family means putting everyone else first, and that feeling invisible was just part of aging. But that night, alone with my thoughts, I realized something powerful. No matter how old we get, no matter how many birthdays pass us by unnoticed, we still have the power to change our stories. It's tempting to believe that by the time you reach your later years, your path is fixed, that you've played your role, and now it's time to just settle into the way things are. But that's not true. You're not a character in a story someone else wrote for you. You're the author of your own life at every stage. That realization that you can still change, still grow, still demand more from life, is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means stepping into the unknown, facing uncomfortable truths, and risking disappointment. Liberating because it means you're not stuck. Because it means your worth isn't tied to what others have or haven't done for you. Because it means you get to choose how you want the next chapters of your life to be written. I started thinking about all the women and men I know who, like me, have spent their lives giving to others, raising children, supporting partners, helping friends, and now find themselves wondering if anyone will be there for them. And I realized this. It doesn't have to be that way. It won't be that way if we refuse to let it be. Change begins with one small act. The act of standing up for yourself. The act of saying, "I deserve better." The act of refusing to accept loneliness and invisibility as your lot in life. Because when you do that, you send a signal not just to others but to yourself that your life still matters, that your needs still matter. I want to be clear. This isn't about bitterness or blame. It's not about turning your back on family or shutting people out. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about showing up for yourself the way you've shown up for others. It's about learning to love yourself fiercely enough to demand respect, presence, and care. And yes, this kind of change takes courage. Means having difficult conversations. Means setting boundaries. It means sometimes facing silence where you hoped for connection. But it also means opening the door to new possibilities. New relationships, new joys, new ways of being. When I finally embraced that truth, something shifted inside me. I started living with intention, not just routine. I started asking for what I needed. I started surrounding myself with people who valued me. And I started creating moments, big and small, that brought me joy no matter what anyone else was doing. Because here's the thing. Joy isn't something that only comes from others. It's something you can cultivate inside yourself. It's a choice. And that choice doesn't expire with age. It doesn't belong only to the young. It belongs to all of us at every stage. So, if you're sitting here feeling invisible, unappreciated, or forgotten, know this. You still have time. Time to change your story, to rewrite the script, to live your life on your terms. Don't wait for others to show up. Show up for yourself. Love yourself fiercely. Demand what you deserve. And watch how your life begins to change. Because the greatest gift you can give yourself, at 75 or any age, is the courage to live fully, boldly, and unapologetically. And that, above all, is worth celebrating.